Welcome to the Real Recovery Show. We air our episodes every Friday at noon. All of our episodes are also on the meetingspace.com, as well as other formats that we'll mention later. And we just interview people, and we have very focused conversations where people share from the deepest part of their experience and are as honest as possible. And we're here just to share what we've learned that have helped us to heal and to listen to other people's experience that we have come on the show and learn more and shift more in our perception as we go through our lives and we heal together. No matter how much anybody ever thinks that they do it alone, even in addiction, nobody really ever really is doing it alone. And that brings us to our topic today, because this idea of being so unique or so separate or being, so super independent, this idea that we need to protect ourselves and somehow guard our lives and run our lives and get whatever we think we need, has, in our survival, in our idea of having to take care of these things, has bred a thinking, a programming of certain levels of selfishness that, and I understand the word selfishness it generally has a negative connotation to it, where people think, oh, you can't call me selfish, I'm not selfish, I'm da-da-da-da. And some people don't care. But selfishness is an issue when we are trying to have more peace in our lives, when we're trying to have better relationships, when we are trying to do better at work, when we are trying to be more comfortable in our own skin, when we are trying to feel a deeper sense of security, when we are trying to feel like we fit in, and when we are trying to deal with PTSD or addiction. Oftentimes when you hear people talk about their addiction and how it started, there was a click. There was a moment when they felt like they shifted from self-consciousness to freedom, like a feeling that they could, after they drank a drink or took a pill, that they felt like they were able to not be so concerned with what people thought, and they were able to let go more. And so because that click happened for them, where they had this ease and comfort and the ability to participate in things, like be able to dance when they felt like they couldn't get the courage, or go up to another person sometimes to try to get a date, or to be able to just go along with what's going on with their friends without feeling so separate. Doing alcohol or drugs would help them to feel a part of artificially. And so they didn't necessarily develop the tools or deal with the issue for that self-consciousness. And we all have that in our society as our programming, and not just our society, but many, many, many societies have this idea of who you think you need to be, how you need to present yourself so that you fit in, so that you're accepted by your peers. And it's such a big, huge part of our evolution and our survival mentally and emotionally, that oftentimes, we will abandon deep-rooted consciousness beliefs that are actually good for us, or our intuition that actually speaks on behalf of our highest good, to fit in, to do things, to go along with stuff. Sometimes it'll be a job that asks us to do something that doesn't really vibe with us, or it's friends that are asking us to go along with something that doesn't really feel like a yes, or situations we could be put in where we self-abandon and we don't realize what's going on, that we're actually creating our own suffering. And so today's topic is selfishness versus selflessness, and it's so important of a topic because it's another topic, just like the powerlessness one, that it took years for me to really digest what selfishness was. Because if you called me selfish, that was one of the worst things you could have said to me. I valued being seen as a good person. I had experiences as a child that really put some trauma energy into that one, and so it was such an intense issue for me that it was part of my my trauma interaction with other people. Like, they have this saying, of course I've mentioned it before, that if it's hysterical, it's historical. And so the concept of selfishness and being called selfish, I mean, there were so many levels to it that I needed to understand. There's a saying in recovery, when all else fails, get out of yourself and help another person. And that's great, but if you're in recovery long enough, or if you've had any experience of codependency, or shut down and experiences and behaviors of self-abandonment, getting out of yourself and helping another person could actually be part of your problem, where you're not actually addressing your own issues and taking responsibility for what's going on with you, or maybe you're using helping somebody else to avoid looking at yourself. And so you could see by everything that I've already said, it is it's a simple concept that is very complex in its application, because in just like with any word, in any kind of like recovery program or anything, it's important to define it for ourselves. You know, to take the word and to say, what does this really mean to me? What really resonates for me? And so for me, selfishness had to be redefined for me. My old definition, well, I'll give you a little history for a second. When I was a little girl, as most of you know if you've seen other episodes, you know, my mom had told me that I was a burden to her, and that I was the cause of her misery. My mom had addiction. She was in recovery for it, but she blamed me for the situation she was in, and I took it on. And so, and the reason being, she didn't know she wanted to stay married to my dad. She ended up getting pregnant with me. She didn't know she wanted to have me. She ended up giving birth to me, and she would have, you know, she was never all in, so she had like this back and forth, like whenever her days were not good, you know, and I was around or part of her experience, I would be the scapegoat for her misery. And so, and as a child, like, I couldn't handle that idea and took it very much on, especially the way she talked to me. But later on, you know, I'm now in my 50s, and I've done a lot of work on myself, and so there's great freedom in understanding and forgiving and getting to a place of deep tolerance and compassion for another person's headspace, because we understand what our own headspace can cause us to feel and do and see in the world. And so, but one of the things that my mom would do is that she would say, she would call me if I asked for something, you know, if I asked for her to do something for me or complain that I didn't have something or whatever, I don't know. My mom would actually call me greedy, and she would call me greedy enough. And the way that she treated me around that idea, it made me very, very afraid later to ask for help, to ask for money. I had a big issue with under-earning for many, many years. And yeah, it was a problem, because I would always be afraid that somebody would think I was greedy, because I had that program in my mind that I accepted, right? And so the idea that I could be selfish to me was very much like greedy, right? Another version of selfishness for me that was quite toxic was the idea of being needy. So growing up in my family, as some of you may know, if you grow up in dysfunction, doesn't even have to have alcohol or drugs in it, but if there is some sort of overt dysfunction, if there's mental illness, if there's a divorce, if there's some other kinds of abuse going on, other addictions, there could be workaholism, there could be militarism, all or nothing thinking, but whatever happens in an alcoholic or addicted or dysfunctional environment, is that somebody ends up feeling that it's not okay to need, because the people who are the caretakers are overwhelmed. They are having a hard time. Their own lives are unmanageable, and they have some stuff that they need to heal for themselves. But life is in session, and they have people that they're responsible for, children, and it's very difficult to not give off the impression or even accuse the children of being needy when they're feeling overwhelmed and feeling like they are too burdened, like they can't handle the situation. And so, again, in my 50s, I totally understand this, and I don't have anything against my parents for what happened. But as a little girl, I promise you, I took all that stuff on. And so, again, the idea of being needy. Now, when you grow up in that environment, you don't feel your feelings. Who are you going to feel your feelings with? You're too much, blah, blah, blah. And so it becomes don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, don't need. And as I grew up, you can imagine how that kind of programming stays with a person and affects every area of their life. I can't ask for help. I can't cry. I apologized for crying. I apologize for crying. I apologize for crying. And whenever I see people in recovery apologize for crying, I make a very point effort to say, that's not something to apologize for. You're just feeling your feelings. And then we just focus on what's going on. I don't make a big deal out of it. I don't go, oh, honey. And at the same time, I don't co-sign the apology, because it's part of that old programming. It's part of the reason why they're so overwhelmed. It's part of the reason why they're miserable in that moment, is this idea that they don't want to appear needy. They don't want to appear greedy. They don't want to appear needy. And these are ideas that people take in their programming into recovery that are part of the definition of selfishness, right? So it's really difficult, because recovery is a selfish thing. We're wanting to heal. We may come into recovery because somebody else threatened to leave us, or we got a nudge from the judge, or a stronger nudge and there's an ankle monitor, or where the doctor said we're going to die, or we're going to get really super sick and may die or just suffer more if we don't do something about it. Whatever it is that's part of our story, our narrative of our bottom, we seem to be doing it maybe for other people, but we're really not. We're doing it because wherever it is, the threat is hitting something within ourselves, where we're experiencing, we don't want to lose a kid, we don't want to, etc. We're experiencing something in our self-experience that's intolerable to us. It's reached a point where we're like, that crosses the line, I don't even want to go. And we're willing to do something different. So recovery is a selfish thing, right? Now, Ayn Rand is an old author. She's not around anymore, but if you want to look her up, A-Y-N Rand, R-A-N-D. When I was a teenager, I read all of her books, The Fountainhead, The Virtue of Selfishness, etc. And in The Virtue of Selfishness, it was just a really good book that taught me about that the word selfish in and of itself is not bad. It is the meaning that we give the word. And so if you are doing something where you have a boundary and it's healthy and you're taking care of yourself, you will naturally want to be helpful to other people. But if you're super guarded and only caring about yourself, then that is the type of selfishness that gets the bad, that's the unhealthy way to be in, that kind of headspace, the selfishness where we only care about ourselves, that we're only thinking about ourselves, because we are not trying to join, we are not trying to be helpful, and we are missing the boat, we're missing the point. And it's ironic, really, because it is the beginning of all isolation, where we become so self-centered that all we're thinking about is ourself. And when we do that, we don't even have to physically isolate. I mean, we've all had the experience of feeling alone or different in a crowd full of people. And what creates that experience is that sense of self as our main focus. That our whole thinking, our whole orbit is around the me, furthermore me, the I, the gimmies, the what am I afraid of losings and stuff like that. And so selfishness needs to be defined for us to really get to a place of being able to be free. And so when we're asked and when we're taught in recovery that selfishness is the root of our troubles, that somewhere along the line we put ourselves in a position to get hurt, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate seemingly without provocation. But we have to go back and we have to look at ourselves and we have to write. And in 12-step recovery, there's a whole inventory where people can look at what their part is. But in general, recovery, in anything, in rehabs, in group therapies, and in books, in self-help books, in workbooks, it always takes us to a place, or I should say, in any really good ones that are really super helpful, it takes us to a place of taking personal responsibility and doing it from a shameless place, like it's information, and this is just what we've been running on, and so we can look at where we have been selfish from with self-love, and so today's topic of selfishness gives us an opportunity, if we're new to recovery or if we've been here a while, to kind of look at what are our own personal definitions for that word. Now, interestingly enough, if you have had any codependency in your life, you'll understand this. Oftentimes when we think of somebody being selfish or self-seeking, we think of them as only being a taker, right? We think there are takers and there are givers. And from that perspective, we can even say that the giver loses and the taker gets. And so we think either from a martyristic perspective that we are better because we are givers and not the takers. But be really careful about that, because what fuels codependency is the other side of the same coin of selfishness, which is another kind of selfishness. So there's the selfishness of what am I needing to get from this person? And then there's the selfishness that says that I'm going to give to this person, but they owe me. I'm going to give to this person, but they need to appreciate it. I'm going to give to this person so that I seem like a good person to other people. I'm going to give to this person so that I can feel good about myself. I'm going to give to this person because it's an investment in what I need for myself, and all these things, when we're first in recovery, we're encouraged, get out of yourself and help another person, etc. And a lot of it can carry this other version of selfishness with it, and that's okay, because progress, not perfection, it becomes something that starts to develop over time. At least we're now doing more for another person if we weren't doing it before. At least we're now putting ourselves out there and wanting to be helpful in other ways without just focusing on ourselves so much. But I have been both sides of this, my friends. I have been the person who is all about, what am I going to lose? What am I not going to get? And what do people think about me? From the place of, what am I going to get from a person, and how can I manipulate a situation, because it's all me, furthermore me. And I have swung past normal, and I have been that codependent person that was the hero, that was Captain Save-A-Ho, that would have the cape growing out of my spine, and by the way, in a very public way, so that all who can appreciate. And I have to be so careful, because on the selfish side, that's all self-seeking, there are elements of it that are very valuable to keep. There is the taking care of ourselves. There is the finding out what's good for us and healthy for us, and not self-abandoning. And then on the codependent side of selfishness, there is the desire to be helpful. There is the desire to be good. There's just the desire to add to the world, to leave it a better place than we found it, right? But the use of it is too much. The way it's being done is too much, and it creates discord, And so wherever you are in the spectrum, everybody is a little bit of this, a lot of that, or a little bit of this and a lot of that, and so nobody's exactly the same exact. It's all a spectrum, but everybody has a little of all of it, and who doesn't want to be appreciated for doing a good thing for somebody? Right. Who doesn't want to feel like somebody's going to reciprocate and be there as well? Who doesn't want to feel like we're able to get what we need and accomplish things in this world, etc.? Who doesn't want to feel like they're able to take care of themselves and not be over dependent on another person? Like, there are basic core survival needs that are being expressed in this, but they are being bastardized. They are being magnified. They are being taken from just where it's supposed to be for a healthy, interactive, interconnected survival system, and it's being pushed out into an extreme because of fear, because of this fear that we're not going to be okay if we don't have da-da-da-da-da. And this, my friends, is what keeps people in dysfunctional relationships. And I speak from experience on many a dysfunctional relationship. And this is what keeps people in interacting in work situations in a way that they cannot take care of themselves, or they step on the toes of others, and they garner fear and resentment from their peers or their employees or anybody they manage or come across, or customers, because of their attitude. And they don't know, we don't know until we learn that these are the things that are coming out of us, and that they're coming across in a way that hurts other people, but it really hurts us, right? So this is a good conversation for anybody, not just people who have suffered from addiction, right? But when it comes to the addict or the alcoholic, when it comes to that, selfishness, this type of selfishness, this is what keeps a person from having peace of mind. This is what keeps a person from feeling the we in recovery, and operating still from the separate experience of the I. So today we're going to be talking about not just what selfishness looks like, but we're going to be talking about another experience of selflessness. And selflessness isn't abandonment. It's not self-abandonment. It's not people-pleasing. It's not being focused only on other people. It isn't what that looks like it is either. Selflessness, because, and I will say this, and this is why it's so friggin' important to me. I have seen people in recovery, and I'm sure I've seen it because I've done this, right? They're trying to be the person they think they need to be okay. And so they're trying to be of service, but they're trying to put more effort into their service, into be helpful, into working with other people, than they are actually doing their own inventory and their own spot check. Like they're losing humility, and they're focused so much. Their recovery becomes so much more dependent upon other people and what they're doing with other people, that they're not balanced in their recovery anymore. And there's a reason, I feel, why the idea, when all else fails, get out of yourself and help another person, is such a big deal. That it says when all else fails. Because there has to be meditation, which I just got chills. There has to be a conscious contact with our higher power, whatever it is, right? There has to be a meeting of ourselves and being honest with ourselves. There has to be a taking responsibility for our lives and our experience and asking for the guidance. There has to be a willingness to be wrong. There has to be a willingness to do something different if we find that we're wrong. There has to be a willingness to make an amends if we find out that we are wrong and we have to do something different. And if we don't do those things, the recipe doesn't produce the right results, because we could be doing all of the helping of other people and still remain very selfish. And I know that sounds paradoxical, but for somebody who has done that, I promise you it's very real, because our whole self-esteem, our peace of mind is too dependent upon helping other people, and we're not centered and cleaning out our own blocks to the awareness of our own true self and our own connection consciously with everything, right? And so this topic hopefully will give you some clarity, so that you have a new, cleaner, and if there's anything, in this that doesn't really resonate, of course, always listen to what resonates with you on a deep level. But have an open mind, because it is through having conversations like this with other people that I ended up developing more and more my understanding, my deeper understanding of what it is for me, right? This is a very personal process. It's very important that we recognize that it's a personal process, and that doesn't make it selfish.
Right.
In fact, it's one of the best things that I could do for anyone else is to clean up my own stuff. Because when I don't have my stuff cleaned up, I promise you it comes out sideways. And when it comes out sideways, I take hostages. And there's a lot of collateral damage, and there's sometimes things I can't fix. And the lessons are always there. And so to look at where my story of myself is at play, and to question my motives and where I might have been running on fear, and we'll get into that in a little bit, and to be willing to be wrong and say, okay, all right, this is where I was selfish. It's just information. I don't want to be selfish. I want to join. And I don't want to take on your life either, right? I cannot play God in my own life, can't play God in yours.
Yeah.
So I have to stay right-sized, right? And so understanding what selfishness is versus selflessness helps us to go, okay, I can visualize this for myself. I could see, where do I need to be? And we'll talk more about the tools of that and insight of that in a little bit.
I'm Tay Tay. You didn't introduce me yet, so.
Oh, sorry, that was selfish of me. Hi, Tay Tay.
It's interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking about something from when I first got sober. I was told about this game that you play. And in the game, you want to help people. And every time you help someone, you get a point. Every time you help someone and don't tell anybody about it, but somebody finds out, you get 2 points. And every time you help someone and no one ever finds out that you did this thing, you get 3 points. And I remember thinking, so how do you win if no one ever finds out? And it's that idea of, wanting to gain something out of doing something good. And I feel like I have millions of points, but you'll never know because I won't tell you about it, and
except on the show.
But I haven't told you the things that I did over, it's just one of those ideas of like, okay, so if I do this thing, then I get this reward. But, the reward is doing the thing. It's not actually the reward. And
right.
I am someone that does think of me first, and so being able to do things for people and no one ever knowing about it is a bigger gift than I could have imagined 16 years ago, Last week we were talking a lot about peeling the onion, and I feel like a lot of my selfishness is those trauma responses that you were talking about, because for me, there is a lot of shame tapes, and there is a lot of I'm not good enough. So if you know the things that I do to help people, then maybe I'll be good enough in your eyes. But then I'll lose the game. You know, and so there's that little paradox too.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's, sometimes we're so like cash and prizes oriented. We've watched a ton of game shows, and people are looking for the trophy, and we're wanting the atta girl or the atta boy, and so we're so focused on the destination and not the journey that recovery brings us into these day-tight compartments of one day at a time, one moment at a time, and one act at a time, one experience at a time. And it brings us into the present. It teaches us mindfulness, and it says, okay, right now in this experience, what are we doing right now? And giving becomes its own reward. Because instead of focusing on the carrot that's dangled proverbially in front of our horse face, we're actually, in the race that we're running in life, we're actually more so focused on what we're doing rather than what we'll get for what we're doing. Like we're more focused on the deep conviction that it feels intuitively right to do the thing. And in that, there's an inspiration, there's an energy that comes up within us, there's a love energy, there's to care, to get excited. I just made a gift box, a God box with like I etched one of my best friends, her face and her now husband's face, and put their names on the sides of it into this gorgeous music box, right? And I was so excited to do it because, the etching machine and being able to like get to be able to do more than just, etch somebody's sobriety date into something like I could do pictures now. And so I was inspired and excited, but I was like really tuned in, and I wanted to do a good job, but I was tuned in intuitively, and I was like, okay, so how do I do this? And I learned so much. And so there was a lot of joy in learning about how to do this, inverting pictures and make the white show up and everything, right? I'm not going to get too much more into it. Don't want to bore you. Unless you're into that, then you can call me. But I was so excited to give her the thing. I was so excited that I wanted her to be, I wanted her to feel like, I wanted her to be, how to explain it? I wanted her to receive it. I was like crazy. Like I was like on both sides of it. I was enjoying the giving, right? And then I was like part of her experience of the receiving it. And so the joy of it all, it's like, it's a music box, you know what I mean, at the end of the day.
Right.
But it's the power and the energy and the love and the inspiration. And so there's nothing bad about feeling good,
right,
about doing something, for someone else.
Yeah.
It's when we're doing it for someone else to get something.
Right.
Like, oh wow, I got to do this thing so that I can feel good. Yeah. I'm not doing that. I felt to do it, and I was following that inspiration, and so there was no downside. There's win-win.
Yeah.
Highest good for all.
Right.
And a great experience. And so for an addict like me, who of course loves to feel good, but is willing to feel all the things and recognize the necessity of it, and the value of the classroom. I love that high. I love the high of sharing something that has worked for me to help another person. I love the lights going on in somebody else's eyes, as we talked about last week. I love giving something that I really feel truly inspired to give. However, there have been times when somebody would say something to me, right, and they need a thing, and I would feel bad, and out of the story in my head of who I think I'm supposed to be, I give them something. And that experience of giving somebody something when I don't feel inspired or guided sucks. Sucks. I feel gross. I feel used. I feel manipulated. I feel a sense of self-abandonment. I feel disconnected. I don't feel a we experience. I don't feel a highest good for all experience. I feel like I martyred myself. I feel like I'm teaching myself love is for sacrifice. And in that moment, I was operating out of fear, although I didn't necessarily realize it at the time. But I was afraid. I was afraid of being the person that let the person down, or of not being liked, or somebody thinking that I was greedy or needy, back to those scripts, or or coming from an idea that somebody's going to hurt me or punish me or not give me something later because I wasn't there for them then. And like these were all like the transactional relationship and shame tapes that I had as a child, but that were activated and continue to be activated for a very long time. And so, you know, giving without it being a yes, without it being for the highest good, without it being for the other person's highest good as well, regardless of, you know, getting anything in form in return, right? Giving truly is honestly one of the joyous of highs for me. And if you haven't experienced it enough, you know, it is because there are ideas about who you think you're supposed to be that are just in the way. And as we let go and we get more comfortable and we feel more secure and we feel more safe, especially when, ironically, we selfishly learn where our boundaries need to be, where our yeses need to be honored more, where our nos need to be honored more, we become more self-actualized and able to give more from our overflow because we're not concerned with what people think too much. We're not concerned with losing something. We trust. We trust in our core. We trust in our guidance that we have what we need.
Yeah, I was thinking about like so my current mentor tells me a lot to not care about what other people think about me. And that's a really hard thing, you know. And I'm thinking about that idea, and something that came up was when I first started working for you years ago. One day I was really upset and I was crying, and I was trying to not cry in front of you because I didn't want you to think she's weak or she's needy or she's too much or I can't have somebody this much of a basket case.
I made you cry once too.
You made me cry, yeah. but that wasn't this day.
Okay.
But I was crying, and you said, "No, you need to feel your feelings," and you said that, you know, and I remember thinking, "Feel my feelings." What boss gives you permission to feel your feelings? Like, what alternate universe have I ventured into? You know, there's like a freedom in that, and in being able to do that for somebody else. And I work with someone who has been experiencing a lot of anxiety, and over the last few months, she's been really working through this anxiety. And I gave her a few like books that I have on anxiety and some little different like, you know, mantras and different things like that. And I gave her a few of my little things that I used to like play with at my desk when I was super anxious. And she talks about those things a lot, you know, and how much that's helped her because I let her feel her feelings. I listened to her feelings. I saw what I could do to help those feelings and didn't expect her to buy me a bunch of stuff too. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like it's not about that. Like it's about the experience, the strength, and the hope. And I have an experience in this. So I have some strength in this. So I have some hope in it. And I don't need anything back from it. And I never thought I would talk about it. You know, like it's not something that like, I mean, like it's just those cool little moments for you. Like for me, it was feel your feelings. And for her, it's those little trinkets, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes when we do things for people in our society, they think they owe us too. Like even when you're doing something and you know you're good, you don't need anything for the person in return. Like somebody will be like, "Oh, let me do this for you," you know. And it's like, and I don't know, I don't want anything to be because of that. Right. You know, I've had people send me letters and tell me that they appreciate something I did or something I do, or even like the meeting space, we get letters saying like, "You've helped me, yada, yada, yada," by keeping going and whatever. And I appreciate that. I feel like it's validating. I feel like it's I feel like it's the God in them talking to the God in me, saying, let's keep going, that kind of a thing. We appreciate what's going on. But I don't ever want somebody to feel like they owe me something. I remember one time when I was a kid, and I had like 103.5 temperature, and I was super sick, and I went to my mom and I asked her to take me to the doctor, and she told me I was making it up, and I was really sick. Like she didn't take my temperature or anything, and I ended up taking a taxi to the doctor, and then when I went to the doctor, I told the doctor that I could barely talk. My mouth was all like messed up. I think I told you the story.
Yeah, you've told me the story.
And I ended up going, but they don't know it maybe.
No,
So,
they probably don't.
so you have to hear it again. But I ended up telling the doctor, I wrote it down on a piece of paper, that I don't have a temperature. There's something else wrong. My mom said that there's nothing wrong with me. And, and that I was acting. I was being a drama queen or whatever like that, which is all another way of her telling me that I was being greedy, needy, right? So they were like, whoa, like there's something wrong in your house. And then, but we can't deal with that. We're dealing with you. And so they gave me all this medication and prescriptions to fill, and they sent me home. Well, they asked me, you have somebody coming and picking up, and they thought it would be a parent. They didn't know it was a taxi. So I went back out, and I don't think maybe 10. I don't remember. So I left. I don't remember how old I was. I know I was young enough that there was like nobody to drive anything, but whatever. So I go home and I tell my mom she needs to. I have more oomph to take care of myself. I think I'm going to stand up to my mom and I'm going to say, listen, I need you to take me to the pharmacy. And she said that she said she couldn't do that right now, and whatever. And but she said, what are you going to do for me? Like, what have you done for me lately? Like that kind of thing, and like, and it was just like, it was such a transactional situation. And so, she did end up taking me. She was very pissed off at me. I wouldn't go into the pharmacy. I wanted to stand outside. She was the one with the money and the ability to go get the thing. But I just was like, I was so sick. I just I couldn't handle it. I didn't even know why. I just couldn't handle it. So she was pissed at me about that too. But that's the kind of thinking, like to be afraid of rejection, to be afraid that you're not going to get what you need, to be afraid that you're going to lose something that you think you need or you have or something. Like that whole kind of thinking of the addict, of the alcoholic, like that thinking for me, started being really implemented at that young age. And so when I'm talking to somebody or if I'm helping somebody and somebody wants to, if they feel like they owe me for it or something like that, like I don't want to co-sign that, because not just for them, I accept graciously though, if somebody wants to give me something, because I've learned that I don't want to take away from their joy of giving too. And that was hard for me to do for a long time.
Yeah.
But I'm really careful that the narrative of it is clear, because I don't want to feed that programming in my mind that says somebody owes anybody for anything.
Yeah.
It is for fun and for free. All of it. It is because when I share something, like even this show, right? Sharing this, yes, I want to help people. Yes, I want to get whatever it is that I've learned to be out there and to be useful, right? But like in the sharing, I get more clarity. In the talking to other people, I start realizing things. People will say things and they'll say it in a certain way that'll make me have an aha later. Like this is how I heal is by sharing and listening and by processing, And so in this whole process, I've been wanting to speak more because I want to get more clarity and be more helpful, and that's how I feel that the universe or whatever the show showed up, because of the sincere desire to do that, and that's my own narrative. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
But it keeps me right-sized, because it's like, okay, I'm still healing. It's not I am an authority.
Right.
It is that I am still healing, and I'm willing to share whatever it is that resonates with me, that I have learned, that could be helpful, and I'm willing in every moment, including this moment right now, to say, this is what I struggle with, this is what I'm learning, this is what it is that is up for me in my classroom, but this is what I've learned, this is where I'm at, now, like, that I no longer struggle with. These are the tools I've used. These are the insights, the ahas I have. And when these things were shared with me, they helped me. And so here they are. Hopefully they help you.
What's interesting about that idea of, you wanting to give and not necessarily need something back, but like people also wanting to give, it made me think of when I was doing full-time missions. And when I started doing mission trips, like they were little trips, like a $300 trip. And so getting donations and stuff was really, really simple. Like, ask 10 people for $30 and you're there. It wasn't anything extravagant. And as I started to get into more and more longer-term missions, the dollar amounts got higher. And I remember thinking, I cannot ask people for this kind of money. Like, I can't do this. And someone said to me that I am denying someone of being a blessing, and that my wallet is not their wallet. And so for me, I have to think that, like,
I love that.
When I'm giving, when I'm being of service to somebody, my level of service might not be what their level of service is. So they might be blown away by it, or they might think it's nothing because their level of service might be much higher than my level of service. And so, like, that's something I have to think about is, whose wallet am I using? Am I using my wallet or am I using God's wallet? Because those are two different wallets.
Right. Always. They're always two different
wallets. They're always two different wallets.
And that's the thing, like, are we being self-conscious or are we being God-conscious? Are we being higher power conscious? And, when it comes to giving, one of the tools, one of the, like, the little measuring sticks for me is, am I caring what people think or am I caring about people?
That's a good one, yeah.
If I'm caring about people, if I'm caring sincerely about people, and I also recognize at the same time that I don't necessarily know what the highest good looks like, then I could be detached from the results, but the care comes across. But when I care what people think, then, man, I'm in danger of myself because I have been codependent. Right. And so if I care what people think, man, they will use, or they could use, the whole I want to be seen as a good person thing against me. And I have had people do that. I have been manipulated. And why have I been manipulated? Because I cared what people thought. Right. And if I wasn't settled within myself to ask myself, do I feel like I'm a good person or what? And to finally get to a place where I felt like, I may have things that I don't like about myself that I still want to heal. Right. And how I behave or anything, like if I got angry or whatever. But at the same time, I do love myself and get to that place. And to get to a place of self-love is having to move through a place of self-forgiveness. But in order to even get there, I have to be able to be honest, self-honest. I have to be able to ask myself, what is really true about my motives? What is really true about myself? And be willing to recognize that, like, okay, you're not this horrible person because you think things everybody else thinks. Right. So another thing is that sometimes because of addiction, because of illness, because of PTSD, we can end up becoming more dependent on other people than we want. And then we feel shame about it. And if we're with people in our lives that make us feel bad about it, as well, by, telling us that, we're burdening them or something like that, it could be even worse. And so we may come into recovery being afraid of being too selfish and ask for help. We don't want to waste anybody's time. Yeah. They say in recovery that, was it like a 500-pound telephone or something? It's 500-pound help. It is. Right? Like, nobody wants to pick it up to call a person because they think they don't want to burden anybody. They don't want to bore anybody. Well, and now they don't want to embarrass themselves.
Now people want to text instead of call.
Right? But the whole thing is, like, I don't want to burden you. I think my situation's too bad. Yeah. I don't want to bother you. I think my situation's not bad enough. Right. And I don't want you to see how messed up I am. Right. But I'm afraid of what you're going to think.
And then you won't want to be my friend anymore. Yeah.
And so, but these are the thoughts that stop us from taking care of ourselves. And so then we don't end up taking care of what we need to take care of and heal. Right.
And we also don't give the other person an opportunity
to help.
Right.
But we don't know that yet. I mean, I remember my first mentor that I was like very much like, why are you helping me? I don't understand. Like, I'm thinking you're losing. I came from that taker giver kind of mentality. Like, one person has to lose. Right. I couldn't understand that her recovery was infused by yours, by helping. by because when we help another person in a healthy way, we tap into our intuition, and we tap into our heart, and we tap into our higher power. We tap into that. So in every experience with another person, we join with that energy. And that's why we receive in giving. That's why we receive what we need. You know, we get what we need. We get our intuition, we get our guidance, we get people coming into our lives, helping us with things that maybe are in our blind spot or maybe are difficult for us, etc. And so we move from the concept of being over-dependent. And if you are in a situation where temporarily you are struggling and in a way that you feel that you are more dependent upon another person than you would like, at least recognize that maybe in that moment that's an experience they need to have with you as well, and that you can just keep checking in with yourself to see if you're doing everything you can honestly to become more interdependent rather than dependent, you know. And that is like, do I really need this person to do this? Maybe I could try to do this myself, you know, etc. And if you're on the other side of the spectrum where you're too independent and you won't let anybody in and you won't let maybe start recognizing, how can I take little baby steps to have somebody help me or have somebody come in, you know, that whole intimacy, into me I see, mm-hmm. you know, intimacy. It's like, well, I could actually make this phone call to this person. I could talk about this one thing. You know, I could write this stuff down. And little by little by little, there's a meeting ground of our minds, you know, like where we're not being so independent that we keep you at an arm's distance, or we're not being so overly dependent where we're taking you hostage, but we're doing our very best. We're blooming where we're planted, and in that moment, taking care of what we feel like we can. And little by little, we heal. And we get more balanced. So I promise you, if you're in a place where you feel like you're in one of those extremes, it changes. Yeah. Just keep taking those little baby steps. And don't be afraid of being too selfish. Selfish is when you're only considering yourself, when you're only thinking about yourself. It's about learning how to turn everything over to a power greater and to want everybody's highest good and to join. And so if in the moment we can ask ourselves, you know, what am I really afraid of? What's really going on? And maybe I could take this moment to do this differently and to give back a little bit and to take, you know, responsibility. Like if somebody's paying for a lot of the things that you're doing, you know, with them or something like that, but there is a little way that you can pay for it yourself, or you can physically do something that's worth money to them, for them. Without it being transactional, seek your own intuition, but where you're self-empowered in it, right? Where you're not overly independent and you're not overly dependent from your own intuition, your own standards of what you feel. Mm-hmm. And by the way, this whole idea that nobody is dependent on anybody else is a facade.
Right.
It is a facade. Everybody is interdependent. Everybody is. Just think about the food you eat and the farms that had to produce it. Just think about the gas in the car you're driving and all of the businesses that had to go into that for you to be able to have that pump work, for you to be able to put gas in your car. Mm-hmm. Think of the electricity that your house runs on. And you recognize that we are all, in our own way, participating in each other's lives. There is no place that other people are not touching in my life. There's not a moment. There's this show. There's wonderful Johan who's mm-hmm. made it possible. There's PHLV radio. There's recovery. There's all the people that have helped me. There's the people who made this microphone and made the camera and the electricity that's pumped into this radio station. We are all interdependent. We are all interdependent. And to recognize that as a good positive narrative and to focus on interdependency and intuition as our healthier assets to realize in our lives helps us to get out of self. It helps us to stop feeling these two extremes of like getting out of myself and focusing only on somebody else, or being so independent that I'm too focused on myself in that way. Getting to a place of recovery.
Yeah. And that place of recovery, you know, it's funny because we do talk about this being a selfish thing, you know, this idea of getting clean and sober and doing it for yourself. Mm-hmm. But once you start to like develop who you're going to be as a recovered human instead of as a taker, like, you do want that idea of selflessness. Like, you do want that. But you have to do it in a healthy way, too. Like, we talked about last week, you know, how, like, you know, my powerlessness takes me to the extreme of everything, whether it be drugs, alcohol, food, sex, working out. Like, I am the extreme, right? And so I have to. Yeah.
We can all be.
So I have to do the same thing with this idea of helping people. Like, I can't fight. I can't, like, get lost in service. But I also can't get lost in not being of service. And so, like, there's these balances that you have to find. I wish we were all Libras, you know, like, where we could balance the scale. But
Libras.
That's what I think of when I think of balancing the scale. That or the judicial system.
What's wrong with Geminis?
well, and Geminis too. I mean, because they have the two sides, you know, like but.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get you off topic. Go ahead.
But yeah, so, like, you know, like, there's this idea of, like, having to have that balance of, like, being of service, but also protecting yourself in it and not letting yourself get to either side too much.
Yes, exactly. Ultimately, balance is the most important thing, but it's not about balancing two extremes. It's about leaving the two extremes and getting into a place of finding out where your true safety comes from and coming from a more self-actualized place. Right. So, okay, well, at this point, we're going to stop this part of the episode. We're going to continue this same topic next week. And please remember that the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the people who gave them and do not represent any 12-step program or are meant to replace any professional medical advice. You can watch us on Facebook, YouTube, and on Amazon Fire TV. You can listen to us on the PHLV radio app or get our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. And again, thank you for joining us today. And thanks, Tay-Tay. This has been so good. Yeah. On the Real Recovery Show, we'd like to give a special thanks to our great sponsor and gracious host, PHLV Radio, here in Las Vegas. See you next week.